It's not too hard to work out why the government is denying access to the report on grooming gangs that Sajid Javid commissioned way back in 2018 and has now been completed. What seems to amount to a cover-up, I don't know what else you'd call it, was revealed by the indefatigable Lizzie Dearden recently in her continuing stuttering relationship with the hard right. We're reminded that Sajid Javid had originally said, "I will not let cultural or political sensitivities get in the way of understanding the problem and doing something about it." Which is a shame because they proceeded to let cultural and political sensitivities get in the way of understanding the problem and so not doing anything about it. Sucks. So just to fill in the dots, in December the Independent was told that the work had been completed but would only be used for internal policy making and would not be publicly released. In response to a Freedom of Information request asking for the research carried out and any reports drawn up as a result, the Home Office confirmed it held the information but would not release it. In a letter to the Independent, officials said they had applied a public interest test, but the information was exempt from the Act because it concerned the development of government policy.
Bullshit.
It gets better. One of the main purposes of the exemption is to protect the safe space necessary for ministers and officials to consider policy options in private without risk of premature disclosure, it added. Disclosure would risk preempting decisions still to be made by ministers. In addition, the information could be misleading if made public and used out of context. I wonder if the computer that the Home Office uses to write its refusing Freedom of Information request emails, I wonder if that computer comes with a shovel. I mean, you'd need the entire livestock of an entire Saturday afternoon of Texas rodeos to come out with that much
bullshit.
I can't even imagine they wrote that with straight faces. In addition, the information could be misleading if made public and used out of context. What context could possibly be necessary? Rank, steaming, monumental, biblical
bullshit.
As government cover-ups go, and this is pretty much by definition a cover-up. It's not exactly new.
Back in 2008, the Home Office sent a circular to all police forces in the country saying, as far as these young girls who are being exploited in towns and cities, we believe that they've made an informed choice about their sexual behaviour and therefore it's not for you police officers to get involved in it.
That's the Rochdale rape gang prosecutor Nazir Afzal on the Labour government's cover-up of the Paki shagging. Yep, the Paki shagging. Speaking for myself, I don't even particularly mind if they don't publish it. They can either publish the report and it'll be an absolute bombshell, clearly that's the case, otherwise why are they withholding it? Or they can keep it covered up and everyone will assume the worst and more, so there's no win of any kind for the government here. And of course, Muslims with half a clue want the thing in the open, and some of them are owning the whole matter.
Go to your smartphone and Google Ella Hill. She writes a piece in The Independent in which she describes the religious extremist terminology her abusers were using as they were sexually exploiting her as a child, in which she talks of how they called her an infidel and how they abused her race and her lack of Islamic faith, and justified treating her in this way because they viewed her as less than because they believe themselves to be Muslim supremacists. Don't tell me that their Muslim identity had nothing to do with this.
Our Madge understands that the best of a load of bad options is to own the thing. Boris and co will hold out and grit their teeth for as long as possible, so it's all good. The petition to try and persuade the government to release the thing has now passed 100,000 signatures and waiting for a government response, which will eventually come. So why are they holding out? Got some maths for you. Aforementioned and still indefatigable Lizzie came out with the 19,000 sexual abuse victims over the past year shocker. We know that of those attackers, approximately 84% were Pakistani, so they'd be responsible for a tad under 16,000 of the attacks. Blackboards out children. 16,000 divided by 365 equals 43.8 recipients of Islamic cultural enrichment per day. 43.8 divided by 24 equals 1.8 lucky winners of the Diversity Olympics per hour, so one such every 33 minutes. I'm getting a feel for why the government aren't keen for the report to come out, and it's got nothing whatsoever to do with the information being used out of context. That is
bullshit.
There were just under 1,200,000 British Pakistanis, according to the 2011 census. Many more now, but I'll stick with that figure. I'll just round it up to 1.2 million. So, about 600,000 men. And if we assume that every single case was a different individual, 600,000 divided by 16,000 equals 37.5, or one victim per every 37.5 members of that particular community. However, of course, that number is way too high because it assumes one attacker for every case of abuse, which is not the situation. If you were to assume one attacker for every 5 cases, then that would be one for every approximate 190 members of the community, and that also is almost certainly going to be too high. But if the numbers were anything like that at all, they would represent an absolutely huge, breathtaking percentage of the community. And it would be against just such a backdrop that those secret findings, which aren't in the public interest, would be being released when they are eventually released, which they will be. Do we start to see why the government isn't too keen to release that report? Because when it is eventually released, it will be an absolute bombshell. That being the case, you probably want to sign that petition if you have not done so already. Like I say, I almost hope they don't release it because people, as it is, are imagining the worse and more still. They will eventually release it even though they don't want to, and while they carry on digging their heels in, people will carry on imagining that it's worse than it actually is. So what a win-win situation.